The first time I caught her in my garage, I thought I was losing my mind. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I'd just gotten home from my shift at the fabrication plant. I walked into my garage to grab the drill I left on the workbench, and there she was. Standing right by my toolbox, snooping around like she belonged there, Barbara Aldwell, head of the HOA and self-proclaimed protector of property values. Mid-50s, bleach blonde bob, always wore a visor like she was late for a tennis match. And she had the nerve to look surprised when I opened the door. "Oh, Gregory, you startled me," she said, clutching her fake pearls like I was the intruder. "What the hell are you doing in my garage, Barbara?" I asked, too stunned to even raise my voice. She gave me the same saccharine smile she used when fining people for planting the wrong type of grass. "Just checking on some things. There's been talk of non-compliant storage in the neighborhood." I blinked. "So you broke into my garage." "I didn't break in." "Your garage door was up yesterday afternoon. I noticed a few questionable items. I thought I'd follow up today." Without asking me, she shrugged like it was no big deal. "Well, as HOA president, I have the authority to ensure everyone follows the community standards." "No." "No, you don't," I said, jaw tightening. She turned and walked out like she hadn't just trespassed, heels clicking on the concrete. "You should thank me, Gregory. Some of us care about the look of the neighborhood." I stood there, stunned, staring at the spot she had just been. Then I did what I should have done months ago. I installed cameras. 2 days later, I caught her again. This time she came in with gloves and a clipboard, snapping photos of my garage shelves. I watched the footage later that night, my stomach twisting. She had no idea I'd mounted a camera above the side door, right where she was slipping in. I didn't confront her yet, not until I had more. I wanted a pattern, not just an incident. Over the next week, she entered my garage 3 more times, always in the afternoon. Always when she thought I was gone, I kept quiet. I let her keep digging her own grave, and then one morning a notice showed up taped to my front door. "Garage in violation of HOA policy. Improperly stored tools, hazardous materials present, possible city code violations. Fines pending review." That was it. I was done playing nice. Saturday morning, I walked into the precinct with a flash drive in my pocket and a folder under my arm. The officer at the front desk was scrolling through a tablet, bored out of his mind, until I said the words, "Unauthorized home entry." "Multiple counts, all on camera." He looked up, alert now. "You got footage, 4 separate incidents, same person each time, she's the head of our HOA." He waved me through without another word. Detective Alvarez met me in a small interview room. Tall guy, late 40s, calm eyes that looked like they'd seen 100 weird cases and were always ready for one more. "You're the homeowner?" he asked, flipping open his notepad. "Gregory Miller, I live on Westridge Drive." "What's the nature of the trespass?" I passed him the flash drive. "She's been entering my garage while I'm not home. No permission. No notice. She's not a contractor, not law enforcement, not family, and she's got a clipboard like she's doing an inspection." He plugged the drive into the laptop on the desk, clicked through the timestamps, and leaned in. "All right," he said slowly. "This is clear as day, and you're saying this woman is with the HOA?" "She's the president. Barbara Aldwell. She's been using her position to intimidate homeowners for years, but this is different. This isn't harassment. This is criminal trespass." Alvarez looked at the footage again, pausing it as Barbara rifled through a drawer by my workbench. "You haven't touched anything since the last time she entered." "Nope, I left everything exactly as it was. Figured you'd need to see for yourself." He nodded. "Good. We'll get someone out there for a statement and photos. In the meantime, I'll talk to the DA about opening a case." Back at the house, I waited. Every time I heard tires on the street, I half expected her to waltz up again, clipboard swinging like she was on some kind of mission. But instead, it was Alvarez and a younger officer, Pennington, who showed up just after noon. Pennington took exterior photos while Alvarez stepped into the garage. "Same as the video," he muttered, scanning the shelves. "No forced entry." She always used the side door. Unlocked before. "I've fixed that now." You ever see her elsewhere on your property? Not inside the house yet, but I wouldn't put it past her. As Pennington finished up, Alvarez pulled me aside. We'll submit the footage and your statement today. If the DA moves quick, we'll have a warrant by Monday. If she shows up again before then, call us immediately. I nodded. What kind of charge are we talking? Criminal trespass, second degree, maybe more depending on what she took pictures of and what she did with it. That night, I locked every door and window, even the ones I never used. I started keeping a log every car that passed, every unfamiliar face, every neighbor who paused a little too long while walking their dog. I wasn't paranoid, I was methodical. Monday morning I got the call. The warrant was approved, they'd be serving it that afternoon. I didn't have to wait long to hear the fallout. By 5 o'clock, half the street had gathered near the corner of Alder and Westridge. 2 unmarked vehicles, 1 patrol cruiser, and a very confused-looking Barbara standing on her driveway in a bright pink windbreaker, arms folded like it was all some kind of mistake. "Is this really necessary?" she was saying, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're embarrassing yourself." Alvarez didn't flinch. "Barbara Aldwell, you are under arrest for multiple counts of criminal trespass and unlawful surveillance." The gasp from old Mr. Haverly across the street was almost comical. "You can't be serious," she snapped, trying to yank her arm free as the cuffs clicked on. "I was performing a compliance check. That's part of my role." "Not without consent," Alvarez said. "And not on private property without a warrant or authorization." Barbara's eyes darted around, scanning the small crowd that had formed. She saw me standing beside my truck and narrowed her eyes. "This is your doing, isn't it?" "You did it to yourself," I said, arms crossed. They walked her to the cruiser. She protested the whole way, claiming she had a legal right to inspect community standards violations. But nobody bought it anymore. Later that evening, I sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee as I scrolled through the HOA's official website. It was still live, still listing Barbara as president, but I knew that wouldn't last long. By Thursday, the board held an emergency meeting. It was closed to the public, but word spread fast. Barbara had been removed from her position pending the outcome of her case. The VP, a guy named Stewart who mostly kept to himself, was acting president now. The following week, I was subpoenaed for the preliminary hearing. Court was scheduled for the Monday after next. I showed up early, wearing the only suit I owned. Barbara was already there, sitting beside her attorney, a young guy who looked like he regretted signing on. She didn't look at me when I walked in. The judge reviewed the footage, the officer's statements, and the photographic evidence collected from my garage. Barbara's lawyer tried to argue she had implied permission due to her role, but the judge shut that down fast. HOA responsibilities do not supersede state trespass laws, he said flatly. This is not a civil matter. This is criminal behavior. Barbara's expression didn't break, but her hands clenched on the table. The judge ruled that the case would proceed to trial. Outside the courtroom, Stewart caught up with me. "Listen, I just wanted to say, thanks. I think a lot of us were too intimidated to speak up. We didn't know how bad it really was." "She's been doing this for a long time, hasn't she?" I asked. He nodded. "Years. Most of us just paid the fines and kept our heads down. She manipulated the bylaws, twisted interpretations, and scared people with legal jargon, but breaking into someone's home. That crossed a line." "She crossed a lot of lines," I said. But now, finally, she was going to be held accountable. As I walked back to my truck, I glanced at my phone. The neighborhood group chat was blowing up photos of Barbara being escorted from court, people sharing their own stories, neighbors organizing to review every policy she'd ever passed. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every person she'd bullied, every family she'd fined into silence, every home she'd treated like her personal property inspection zone. And for the first time in years, Westridge Drive felt like it belonged to the people who actually lived there. The trial date was set for early June. I spent the weeks leading up to it working double shifts. and gathering everything the assistant DA asked for time-stamped footage. Witness statements from neighbors who'd seen Barbara lurking around driveways, and copies of the HOA's bylaws showing there was zero language granting anyone authority to enter private property without consent. I even tracked down former board members who'd quietly resigned during Barbara's reign, most of whom were more than willing to talk once they heard what had happened. One of them, a retired accountant named Dolores, handed me a manila envelope in the parking lot of the grocery store. "She always thought she was the smartest person in the room," Dolores said. "Figured no one would ever challenge her, but she got sloppy." Inside the envelope were printouts of internal HOA emails, the kind she wasn't supposed to have anymore. The kind that showed Barbara had been using her position to push through fines without due process, rerouting collected payments into an administrative fund that had no oversight. I passed everything along to the assistant DA, whose eyes lit up when she saw the emails. "This isn't just trespassing anymore," she said. "This opens the door to financial misconduct. We'll need to dig deeper." The case expanded. The city's financial crimes unit got involved, and within a week, subpoenas were issued for the HOA's financial records. That's when the real panic started. Stewart called me the next morning. "I need to tell you something," he said, voice low. "We just discovered multiple withdrawals, tens of thousands labeled as miscellaneous community enforcement fees. None of us ever approved them. Barbara must have been signing them off alone." "Where did the money go?" I asked. "We don't know, but the trail leads to a separate account, one that doesn't appear in the official HOA budget." I didn't say anything for a second, then I asked, "Who has access to that account?" There was a pause. "Only Barbara." The trial was no longer a simple trespassing case. The DA amended the charges to include unlawful surveillance, criminal trespass, and embezzlement. The judge approved the new charges without hesitation. When the trial began, the courtroom was packed. Residents from all over Westridge showed up, some in support, others just to witness the unraveling. Barbara sat at the defense table, hands folded tightly, wearing a dark gray blazer that looked 2 sizes too stiff. Her lawyer looked like he hadn't slept in days. The prosecution started with the trespassing footage. Each clip was projected on a large screen, showing Barbara entering through the side door, clipboard in hand, snapping photos, opening drawers. The room was dead quiet except for the hum of the projector. "Let the record show," the prosecutor said, "that these entries occurred without notice, without permission, and without legal authority." Barbara's lawyer objected once, claiming the footage was inflammatory, but the judge overruled him. Then they brought in Dolores. She walked confidently to the stand, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore in. "How long did you serve on the HOA board with the defendant?" the prosecutor asked. 3 years. "And during that time, did you ever authorize or witness the board authorize home inspections on private property?" "Never." "Did the defendant ever propose such authority?" "She did. It was voted down, twice." The prosecutor nodded. "And what happened after the second vote?" "She stopped bringing it up in meetings, but the fines kept increasing, and people started getting notices for violations no one had ever seen." The prosecutor showed the jury a chart of fines levied over the past 18 months. The total was staggering over $95,000 in so-called violations. The HOA's budget only accounted for $60,000 in spending. The rest, unaccounted. Then came the financial expert from the city. He traced the missing funds to a personal account under a shell company registered in Barbara's maiden name. The transactions were all time-stamped, many of them occurring within hours of homeowners submitting payments. Barbara's lawyer tried to get the financial evidence dismissed, claiming it was unrelated to the original charges, but the judge reminded him that once the defendant's behavior came under scrutiny, any pattern of abuse tied to her role was admissible. When the defense called Barbara to the stand, the air in the room changed. She sat up straight, chin lifted, eyes fixed on the jury like she was trying to hypnotize them. I was doing what I believed was necessary, she said. Our property values were declining. People were leaving tools out, storing chemicals, creating hazards. I was protecting the community. The prosecutor stepped up. You believed entering someone's garage without permission was protecting the community? There were complaints. I investigated them. By trespassing? I don't consider checking on a violation trespassing. You took photographs inside a private residence, opened drawers, and documented personal belongings. That is surveillance, not inspection. Barbara's face twitched, but she stayed quiet. Let's talk about the money, the prosecutor continued. Did the board approve the creation of the secondary account? I had discretionary authority. According to whom? I assumed it was within my administrative rights. And what did you use the money for? Barbara hesitated. Community improvements. Name one. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The prosecution rested its case that afternoon. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 2 years probation for the financial charges, 6 months in county jail for trespassing and unlawful surveillance, and ordered full restitution of the embezzled funds. She was also permanently barred from holding any position on any HOA board in the state. That night, the neighborhood lit up with porch lights and quiet conversations. People gathered in driveways, sharing stories they'd kept to themselves for too long. One family admitted they'd been planning to move because of Barbara's harassment. Another said they'd been fined for a non-compliant garden hose. I stood by my front steps as Stewart approached. We're restructuring the board, he said. We're bringing in a third-party auditor and rewriting the charter. No more loopholes, no more unchecked power. Good, I said. That's exactly what this place needs. He looked around at the gathering groups of neighbors, the laughter, the relief. Feels different already, doesn't it? It did. For the first time, Westridge felt like a neighborhood again, not a fiefdom, not a battleground, just home. It had been 3 weeks since the verdict, and the neighborhood was still adjusting to the vacuum Barbara left behind. The board held a public meeting in the community center to discuss a complete overhaul of the HOA's internal structure. And for the first time in memory, the folding chairs were filled wall to wall. Not out of fear or obligation, or because Barbara had threatened fines for non-attendance, but because people actually wanted to be there. Stewart stepped up to the front, holding a clipboard but keeping his tone casual. We're here tonight to talk about restoring trust and making sure what happened never happens again, he said. We'll be reviewing new bylaws, introducing financial oversight, and opening nominations for new board members. No more closed-door decisions. Everything moving forward will be fully transparent. He looked over at me in the front row and gave a small nod, not a thank you, not a spotlight, just a quiet acknowledgement that the first step had come from someone refusing to look away. After the meeting, I was about to leave when a woman in a forest green jacket caught up to me by the bulletin board. Her name tag read Janice Holloway. I'm with the county compliance office, she said. I've been reviewing HOA operations across the region. Yours came up for a full audit after the trial. I raised an eyebrow. Find anything else? We did, she said, lowering her voice. Turns out your HOA had filed for a community grant 2 years ago, supposed to fund a playground renovation. The money was awarded, but the project never happened. Funds disappeared. I blinked. Barbara again. She filed the paperwork herself. No public record of board approval. It's under investigation now. I took a breath. How much money? Just over $32,000. The hole kept getting deeper. The county launched a secondary investigation. Since Barbara was already facing sentencing and restitution for the embezzlement tied to homeowner fines, the new charges tied to the misused grant money were added to the case, but handled as a separate civil investigation. That meant we weren't done with her yet. Meanwhile, Stewart formed a volunteer audit committee composed entirely of residents with professional backgrounds in law, accounting, and project management. I was asked to join, but I politely declined. I'd done my part. It was time for others to take the baton. Instead, I helped in quieter ways. When the committee sent out a call for old HOA meeting notes, I dropped off every document I'd kept, original notices, duplicate fines, even that ridiculous letter about the possible city violations in my garage. They were cataloged, scanned, and added to the public archive that was now accessible through the neighborhood website. And then something happened that no one expected. One afternoon, a man in a navy suit showed up at my porch. He introduced himself as Victor Langston, a legal rep from a law firm working on a class action suit. "Several residents are coming forward," he said. "We're compiling a case against the HOA's insurance provider for negligence. The board's failure to intervene while Barbara committed financial and legal violations could make them liable for damages." I leaned against the doorframe. "You think there's a real case? If the insurance company knew about prior claims or complaints and failed to act, they could be on the hook. We've already uncovered 2 prior internal investigations that were sealed by non-disclosure agreements." I was stunned. "Wait, are you saying this isn't the first time she's been caught? It's the first time she's been convicted," he said. "But apparently there were allegations from a previous neighborhood she managed before moving here." My stomach turned. "What happened to those?" He looked grim. "Settled quietly, no charges filed. But we're petitioning to unseal those records." The scope of Barbara's damage stretched farther than anyone had thought. And while she sat in a cell awaiting sentencing, the consequences of her actions were still rippling outward. A month later, the final judgment for the civil investigation came in. Barbara was found liable for the misappropriated grant funds. The county ordered her to repay the entire amount within 6 months or face additional penalties. Her assets, including her car and a secondary property she'd kept under a trust, were frozen. And then came sentencing day. I didn't plan to go, but curiosity got the better of me. Barbara was brought into the courtroom in a tan jumpsuit, wrists cuffed. Her lawyer no longer tried to argue innocence. Instead, he asked for leniency based on emotional strain and misinterpretation of duty. The judge, a sharp-faced woman with no tolerance for nonsense, was having none of it. "Miss Aldwell abused her authority, violated the privacy of her neighbors, and stole from the very people she was meant to serve," the judge said. "She did so repeatedly, deliberately, and without remorse." She sentenced Barbara to 18 months of incarceration, with an additional 3 years probation following release. Full restitution for both the homeowner fines and the grant money was mandatory. She would also be required to complete 200 hours of community service under supervision. When the gavel fell, Barbara didn't cry, didn't plead. She just stared straight ahead, jaw stiff, as if refusing to acknowledge the finality of it all. Outside the courthouse, a small group of residents gathered. No one cheered, no one celebrated, but there was a quiet sense of finality. Not victory, just closure. 2 weeks later, the new board held their first open house meeting. This time, they'd invited an attorney to explain every section of the rewritten bylaws. A third-party mediator was present for questions, and every resident received a printed copy of the charter with a summary of their rights and responsibilities. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't dramatic. But it was the kind of transparency we'd needed all along. I stood in the back, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching neighbors speak up without fear. No threats, no fines, just people talking about shared spaces, new projects, and how to make them happen fairly. Before I left, Stuart caught up to me near the exit. "We're naming the new community garden after Dolores," he said. "She passed last week, but she left us a letter. Said she was proud of what we were building here." I nodded. "She deserved that." "So do you," he said. "You lit the match." "I just pointed a camera," I said. "The rest was long overdue." That night, I closed my garage door with a quiet sense of peace. No more clipboard shadows, no more violations taped to the door. Just a shelf full of tools, a few lawn chairs, and the steady hum of the neighborhood finally turning a corner. Westridge wasn't perfect, but it was ours again. And this time, no one was going to take it from us.